Hey there, you beautiful souls. Welcome to the Authentic You podcast, where we dive deep into the power of authenticity and the journey to rediscovering your true self. I'm your host, Kristina Holle, and I'm beyond excited to embark on this transformative journey with you. Ever wonder how authenticity impacts relationship, career choices, and overall well-being? Well, wonder no more, because the Authentic You is your compass on this incredible adventure. So what can you expect from our show? Well, picture this: heart-to-heart conversation, inspiring stories, expert insights on the importance of authenticity. We're going to tackle the masks we wear, the societal expectations we navigate, and guide you back to the essence of who you truly are. The Authentic You podcast, where real stories meet real talk. Get ready to shine your light and live authentically. All right, ladies and gents, let's talk about generational healing and the wounds that we might be carrying from one generation to the next. So today we stand at a pivotal moment. It is a juncture where we can choose to break free from the chains of our past and step into a future that's purely defined by healing, empowerment, and transformation. Sounds pretty amazing, right? So let's get into it. I want us to understand the idea of inheritance. Sometimes it's so easy to just think inheritance has to do with money. But let me tell you, we inherit a lot more than just money if you're lucky enough. Each one of us carries an invisible backpack filled with benefits, the behaviors, the wounds from our ancestors, the generational imprints, often the unspoken shapes of our perceptions, the influences of our decisions, even how we interact with the world. And what happens is that we don't even realize, and it's coming from a good place. This is not a blame thing. This is an awareness thing. So if we can bring these things to light, then we can actually do something with it. Like I said, if you bring it to light, you are in a pivotal moment. You can tip one way, continue to do the same, or you can start to explore and see if you can change some of this stuff. So there's two areas that we're going to talk about today. As many of you know, I ran the mother-daughter retreat this weekend. Super insightful. I have some great insights that I wanted to share. That's why we are having this conversation today. So when I say things like being a mother, I want you to understand you don't have to have kids to be able to nurture and be kind and engage with the world. That is not what this is about. This is really about how do we engage? How do we see the world? So it's really around, if you're a mom, so be it. That can make a lot of sense. But even if you're not a mother or a father, it doesn't matter. How do I engage in my relationships? How do I engage at work? These are learnings that might have been carried from one generation to the next. So you want to be aware. So there's two things out there that we're going to work on today: the mother wound and the father wound. And you may have heard these terms, you may not fully understand them, but we're going to go into it a little bit deeper so you can have a better grasp. And if you think that, and I've seen it over and over again, that the mother wound or the father wound are not present, then you just may not really understand that they are impacting you. When we have wounds, and I'm talking about emotional wounds, it makes us a little bit vulnerable. So you can be as tough as nails, and I know that's from personal experience, tough as nails, doing your thing. But if you have a wound that you are concealing, and there's sneaky people around, and they see that wound, that's where they're coming in. That's why we need to kind of talk about these wounds and how we can release them. So in an idea of a wound, a mother wound might be maybe not feeling worthy, maybe going into self-criticism, struggling with self-love. And it's usually stemmed with how we've been taught how to love ourselves. So I've said this before. Many of us, including myself, have not been taught how to love ourselves. We may have been taught how to care for ourselves. We may have been taught how to survive, but not necessarily knowing how to love ourselves. And I think the part that was really interesting for me this weekend is that I had girls there ranging from 14 to 21. And we were talking in this space, and we're so fortunate that we're having these conversations at such a young age, because I also have retreat spaces with women that are within 45 to 55. And so they're carrying all these unknown boulders into one chapter to the next. So there's beauty in really identifying these things at an early stage. So they will be much more empowered as they move forward. When we're talking about self-worth, learning how to self-love, learning how to manage the armor, the part that is really interesting to share is that armor is already being built at that age. That we were working through some that had the armor up so high that they couldn't engage. So they took on this how can I explain it? They took on the mask, the armor of being strong, tough woman. But it's actually really limiting their way to connect with other people. They may not be able to express themselves the way that they want to because of the toughness. And when we understand that, we just need to learn how to put the armor at certain times and then show our heart at other times, it's really learning, teaching them discernment, how to pivot from one place to the next, which I think we all need that. But it was very evident to me, and the reason why I'm sharing this is that this starts at a very young age, because it's already been carried on from the generation before, and maybe the generation before that, and the generation before that, through the stories, through the narratives, how we feel about love, how do we show love, how do we feel about self-love, for example. Is it selfish or is it not? And the reason why these conversations are really important is because it's about breaking the pattern. You have a choice to break the pattern for yourself, number one, and for the next generation. And I find it extremely powerful. Now, some examples of a father wound. Let's say your dad wasn't around, or maybe he was distant, or maybe he wasn't as nurturing as you would have liked. These are usually things that will show you that you have an area to work on. So if you are scared of failure, if you're emotionally distant, if you are challenging authority, you have struggle with authority, so that there could be something there. Maybe your paternal relationship was marked by some sort of neglect or criticism or absence. So this is a real thing. And you'll know if you still have a little something, because sometimes there's things that come up. I am so grateful that I've been able to witness, and also that I get to be able to create sacred space so people can show me and we can talk about it. And there was no ill feelings. We talked about really big stuff, and we did some really fun activities. But the moms came in and they were very overwhelmed because they are trying to be the perfect mom. And the perfect mom comes from to generation. What I think is a perfect mom versus maybe what your family thinks is a perfect mom is a very different thing. What I feel about perfection, but it's a self-limiting belief. But if we've been brought up a certain way with these belief systems that have been passed by generation to generation, we may not be in a situation that we're serving ourselves, because we could be just on autopilot. We could just be doing what you always do. So here's an example, and I'm going to be pretty open about this. My brother passed away in a motorbike accident. It was traumatic. I was 21, he was 17. But this is really important, because if I didn't have awareness around it, I would be panicked about anything about a motorbike. Motorbikes are bad. You shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that. It's unsafe. Do I like motorbikes? No, but that's my thing. And when my husband got a motorbike, and it was short lived, I didn't go into it and put my stuff on there, my generational fear around losing someone. I let him do his thing, but the kids wouldn't go on the bike. And because of that, he went through his stuff, he got it out of his system, and then we don't have a bike anymore. We bought another boat. But the point is, the reason why I share this story, that could have gone very different. That could have been a very different situation if I allowed the fear, if I allowed the wound with losing someone guide me in every single decision as I move forward. And I think about this often. I'm not perfect by any means, but I know my kids have heard the stories of my life and my family's life, right? It's natural, but they've also heard the pain, right? And that can carry from generation to generation. And what we need to acknowledge is that, does it work for you? Are you going to absorb the pattern, or are you going to release it? So if you're in situations where you may have inherited some of this stuff and we don't even realize it, you could be on a path of, I hate to say it, but a little bit of self-destruction. And not in a bad way. I know that you're like, Kristina, how can you say that and say it's not in a bad way? If you are on autopilot and you don't know that you're carrying some of these unhealed traumas from one generation to the next, you could be carrying some of your fears. Maybe your mom or dad had fears that carried into you, and then you carry it to your kids. Or you don't have to have kids, you carry it to the next generation. And I say this because it should really give you some relief to know that it's not all you. Some of this stuff was just passed over. This is what we do. This is how we deal with it. And we've inherited it. And I'm just trying to speak about recognizing the impact that it has on our life when we inherit some of these traumas. But you have a choice to really choose to heal. And if you want to, you have to be courageous and face the pain. You said maybe your mom criticizes you all the time. And maybe we need to face that head on and let it go, so you don't do it without even realize that you might be doing it to other people. So this isn't about assigning blame. This is merely about understanding. As one individual reflects, it changes the dynamic of the lineage in your family automatically. And it's not just for you, it's for those behind you, those that have already gone through stuff. When you heal, you start to heal the lineage. You heal for your mom, you heal for your grandma. And I always feel like this, they're rooting for you behind the scenes. They're like, yes, you're doing it. And if this is for a guy, girl, doesn't matter. This is not gender specific. This is about emotional healing. Think about where we are now. We're having these conversations. I'm pretty bold with having these conversations. And I realize that I'm meant to have these conversations because I am supposed to help the healing in my family for generation upon generation upon a generation. You are supposed to do the same, but you have to acknowledge that there's some stuff there. So the conversations that I was having this weekend were so powerful because sometimes people don't even realize that they're doing it, but they're caught. And women in particular, this role of mother is very interesting to me. I see mothers who I engage with and ones in my life that are amazing. I can't even stress how incredible these women are and the things that they do in order to make other people happy and safe, and their children are amazing. But by the time they come to me and I am taking the role on, I feel like it's the called role, they're struggling. So whoever needs to hear this, you're not alone. There's many amazing moms that struggle with the idea of, oh my gosh, I'm rushing everywhere. I'm depleted. I've given to everybody else. I don't have any more for me. But I'm here to tell you, you can break that pattern. Because somewhere along the way, there was a belief about what a family looks like. There was a belief about what a mom does and how they're supposed to show up and who they're supposed to be. And I don't know if this resonates with anyone who's listening, but many of us have witnessed moms are self-sacrificing. They put everybody ahead for the greater good. But I'm getting to the point now where I see that mothers are struggling, career moms that are all over the place, and they're really trying to get themselves balanced. So by the time I get to work with them, which is amazing, it's really helping them reframe the narrative. And I would say this, the first question in order to bring this stuff to attention is really about, like, what are your core values and are they aligned? And these moms, these amazing moms, I have 3 right now off the top of my head I could speak to. And they're not just average people. These people are career women where they're running around. One of them has 4 kids, the other one has 3 kids, and they're doing everything, but they're struggling. But I was fortunate enough, they're struggling, but they don't want to talk about it, right? You have to be in trusted space. That's why the retreat space is so special, because I can hear it. I'm like, okay, well, maybe we need to rework the narrative as to what it means to be a great mom. And that's important because generationally, we have been taught, I know many generations that have been taught, especially women in particular, oh, you have to look a certain way, you've got to just take it on, you just keep going. Don't worry, as long as the family is met, everybody is good, then you're successful. But at the end of it, if you're totally exhausted and you're not moving in the direction that you need to go to, then that's not really working. You're not knowing how to love yourself. And it's always around this concept of being a good mom. So I want you to sit back and I want you to reflect right now. What did it mean to be a good mom in your house? What did you see? One thing that came through, which is interesting, the dynamic of working with the daughters and the mom, that the daughters, we don't realize that we're modeling behavior all the time. And the daughters, when they were opening up, they were frustrated because they saw how much the moms were doing. And it didn't feel like other people were doing their part. But that was very eye-opening to me because we don't think that they're watching, but they're watching. And what are we teaching? We're teaching our kids that it's okay to just take on more and more and more instead of regulating how to show up in the world and saying no and having boundaries and being able to delegate. But there is no blame in all of this. This is just merely one identifying and saying it. Just maybe it's time to heal. Maybe we need to change the story we're telling ourselves. Because when we think that that's what it means to be a good mom or a good dad, that we just keep grinding so we don't get seen, valued, or heard, what's the point then? So no wonder you're going to be exhausted. That is a natural evolution of what would happen. When we understand the generational pain, it's not even pain, maybe practices, narratives, because sometimes you might be holding on to these other imaginary boulders that are not yours from generation to generation. about what it means to be successful, about what it means to be strong, that you are deviating from your authentic self. This is where the core beliefs come from. So perhaps we're meant to nurture ourselves first and not push, layer on more to be, quotation, successful, get more money, to move into this place. Because I will tell you, and I know from experience, this is the path to burnout for all these exceptional women. And I know you're in there. I know you're listening to me right now. You're awesome. And guys, you're awesome too. But this is something I just came off of a retreat. I want you to hear this. You're doing great. You really are. And whoever needs to hear it, I'm sending you so much love in this space. I see so many that are punishing themselves that they're not good enough. They're not a good enough mom. They're not a good enough friend. They're not a good enough sister. They let another person down. They didn't follow the generational expectation of who they were supposed to be. It's all false. I know it's easier said than done, but when you start understanding the narrative, then you can start setting yourself free. And I think that that is really important. It allows us to see that the struggles you might be having are bigger than you. You might have just picked them up and just carried them along. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this when you're speaking to someone and maybe you're frustrated. It never really happens when we're in a great place. It's all, I always say, oh, those interesting poor behaviors surface when we're stressed out, frustrated, angry. They just come. You can't even control it. So you start having a conversation, you're frustrated, and then you sound like the person that you couldn't stand that would speak to you that way. And you hear those words coming out of your mouth or the tone or the action. It's because it's still there and it needs to be released. The pattern needs to be broken. Because when we do that, we are saying, no, not today. I'm not going to be that person. But if we pretend it's not there, then be prepared. It will surface its head because it is actually in that space. But I will say this too. To see the mothers and daughters in action, like these moms, really, how great are you that you bring your kids to a retreat like this, where they can be safe and they can say what they need to say. And these mothers got to witness. It's very, very powerful. They got to witness their kids being who they were, not in mom role, but actually witness how they felt about certain things. It's very important for me to capture this. It happened naturally. I have used my intuition. And I don't know if many of you know, but through my awakening, through being more enlightened, this is really moving into personal development on a real level, not just a checkbox. This is, as you evolve, you will become more and more in tune and more tapped into your intuition. And in this space, I used intuition, used my gifts to be able to unlock and provide that safe space. That's where we started having the real conversations. That's where we started seeing patterns. People were expressing they didn't like the way that their moms were being treated in front of their moms. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing that we're talking about this stuff. This is how we break the pattern. Because one thing that I will say, if we're not having these conversations, then how do we break the pattern? We may say to ourselves, oh, I'm so critical. I'm so hard on myself. But where is that coming from? I'm beyond the point of these superficial fixes. Where is that coming from? let's go to the core issue. The core issue is that has been shifted from one place to the next, one job to the next. Maybe your mom was really critical. Maybe your dad was really critical. And because that's a part of how you were brought up, you held it. And that voice is your voice now. And you're critical to yourself. Well, ask yourself, is that working for you? Probably doesn't feel that great. But the good news is we can all change it. These conversations are very important because they allow you to pivot. They allow you to move into new space. And when we get that, it's so powerful because when you understand that, oh man, I'm not just doing it to myself. I actually was given some of this stuff from the generations before. And maybe I'm the person who's supposed to stop it and heal everybody. So if you're listening to this right now and you're taking actions to really better yourself and heal yourself, you're healing past generations. Think about that. So beautiful. Face some of this stuff. And you know why you do that? So future generations won't inherit that wound. But what they will inherit is wisdom, not the pain. Isn't that powerful? If you could pass on, and like I said, this is not about children. This is about the next generation. If we can start showing up in a way where we can pass wisdom over to the next generation, how powerful is that? What is that generation going to do? What magic are they going to make in the world? And that's why the space that we had right now was so powerful, because I got to have these conversations with 14-year-olds who secretly, it was so powerful because in the retreat space, just so you guys have some context, it's not necessarily in a workshop. This 14-year-old came up to me and started totally opening up all this stuff. And she's very private. It was when a candle tipped over and there was wax on the mat and we were flicking it up. And she just opened up and my heart just poured out to her, because you don't realize that these littles are really living in a generation right now that is not the easiest to navigate. It was so interesting, the share, and it was so pure and so sweet. And we had a conversation about the fact that, and this came through intuitively, this conversation. And I think it's so important. I'm going to simplify it, but I think it resonates with everyone. I said to her, you're a unicorn. Remember, you're a unicorn. And a unicorn hanging out with a bunch of horses will always feel as though that they don't fit. Will always try to feel as though that they're not very special. So what does the unicorn do in that situation? The unicorn will try to hide their horn. They'll try to even morph it. They'll do anything to make themselves not go into that space. So they might look for another group, but the group is a bunch of dogs. Unicorn doesn't fit in this group, but again, is concealing and hiding and trying to fit into this space. But the reality is she was never meant to fit into this space. And once she understands that you're a unicorn, you can fly. Why would you want to hang out with people that are average? Go be magical. Go find your tribe, wherever that may be. And I think that speaks to many of us. The generational piece is that many of us are told who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to fit in. And if we're magic or if we're a unicorn, we're like, oh, I don't want to stand out. I don't want attention brought to me. But I'm here to tell you, we need the unicorns of the world. We need them now more than ever. And it's not just a nice to have. Those are people that when you understand, if you're not fitting in wherever it is, and this is a conversation I had with a 14-year-old, but I know it applies to people that are listening. If you're not fitting wherever it is, let me tell you, then it's not your tribe. You're not meant to fit in that group. So really stop, and this is the generational piece, stop trying to morph it in order to do that, because you're only hurting yourself. In this case, you're cutting off your magical unicorn horn. Why would we do that? But why aren't we having the narrative that it's okay to be a unicorn? Go find your tribe and go fly, because we need magic in the world. We need bright and beautiful and vibrant. We do not need more of the same. And if you're trying to fit into a mold where you're more of the same, that's usually because of conditioning that has been told to you from generation to generation. It could be things like, oh, you don't want to stand out because this is what happened when Uncle so-and-so stood out, and this is where we were at. So you want to be safe. And this is not about blame. This is about the acknowledgement of how we've been teaching the next generation. And when we do that, it is very, very powerful to understand that. I'm going to bring Julie up right now.
Hello.
Hey.
Have you ever heard of the saying, if you put your head above the parapet, you'll get shot?
Oh, no, boy.
That's a beautiful way of keeping people from putting themselves out there, being unusual, being bright and sparkly. You know, it's a saying that will help you stay small, if you like. It's instilled with fear.
It is.
And I think fear is something in us that we either take on board and work with through the very core of us, or we take that fear and challenge it. Because we tell ourselves a story, as you know, and a lot of those stories have these little sentences in them. If you stick your head above the parapet, you'll get shot.
Right.
Because it's something I'm into hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that we are hypnotized, we are suggested to, in a receptive state, quite a lot in our lives.
Very true.
And something we can do about that is we can step out, we can dehypnotize. And when we do that, we suddenly drop off these ideas that have been given us. We challenge those things. We say, but if you put your head above the parapet, people will see you. Not everyone is going to have a gun. They may be surprised to see you. My golly, there's someone behind that parapet. Look at her, him.
Well, this is why the healing work is so important. So we can have those conversations, because our generation never had it. There was no one healed on the other side going, it's okay.
That's right.
You won't get shot.
That's
but now, right, we're having those conversations. It is okay. Be the unicorn, pop your head up. You are going to be great.
The other thing I noticed is little things in these generations, little things of almost activities, actions. So I have a daughter who is lovely. She has little things that she likes to do. She enjoys drama, not as in the acting drama, but life dramas. She enjoys the telephone and texting. And she can swing from good mood to awful mood and anger in seconds, very much like her dad. But the unusual thing is, she never lived with her dad. She didn't really know him very well at all. She probably met him about 5 times in her life, if that. But there it was, that generational detail in the DNA. So when you're telling me and you're saying breaking those generational wounds, I understand, because I can see actions. So if there's actions, then there are other things like wounds that we carry with us through the generations. I have noticed, which is wonderful, that this generation, the youngest one, I don't know whether it's Z or whatever it is, I don't keep up with that kind of stuff, but it's the
It's
youngest. So
alpha.
10 years, this decade, the children in this decade seem to be enlightened. They do. The majority of them, they're very attuned to mental health. They're very attuned to ways of old, which is indescribable. For instance, my granddaughter, aged about 2, and I've told you this story before, sat on the coffee table, put a blanket on it, and then crossed her legs and put her fingers and thumbs together and closed her eyes. And she was there for 3 minutes, maybe. For a child of 3 is a very long time. Where did she get that from? That's what we want to nurture.
Well, there's a big piece here though, right? So yes, they come in as indigo children.
That's
and that
right.
was all of us until
Yep.
the generational stuff gets passed on. And it's like, don't sit on a table. Don't do that. We don't sit on tables here. We wouldn't do that. You're
Thank goodness she's
open.
got me for a grandmother. I'm like,
Right.
that's fantastic. Wow.
Exactly.
So I now call her my.
Thank you, Julie. Julie, I think it's a very good point. I love that example. That's why the work of the work is so important, because you can be that person and encourage the magic. Just like the girl that I was speaking to, you're a unicorn. Go find the fellow unicorns. They're looking for you, right? It's instead of going, oh, it's better, my dear, hide the horn. We don't want you to stand out. We don't, because last time someone did, they got shot. Do you see? It aligns with that story. Here's other examples of generational things. So it's interesting that you said around mental health. Breaking silence around mental health is a new thing. I did a talk in Toronto, a big conference talk, and 1 in 5 people have struggled from mental health issues if we're going to talk about mental health. If you think about that, I want you to close your eyes. This is what I did in my big talk in front of all these people. Close your eyes. Think of your neighborhood. Think about all the houses around you. Every 5th house, there's someone struggling from mental health. So why aren't we talking about it more? And I'll tell you, this is the part that is, we're shifting. But that was what, last year I did that talk. There, only 50% of people are talking about it. There's still a stigma attached to it. And this one is a hot to trot one for me generationally, because my mom was impacted with mental health struggles big time. And it impacted my brother and I in our traumatic setup, because she couldn't take care of us. But no one stepped in because of the stigma in our family culturally. To have a daughter that wasn't well was unheard of. So we rather hide it because of the shame that is attached to mental health. And here we are now, years, 20, 30 years later, that I'm talking about it. But I was carrying the shame because of all the mental health stuff. It's only, I am making a choice right now to break the pattern and have the conversations. When I did that talk, it was so interesting because I was talking about the stigma around mental health, how it was so, I was not the person that I was today. All I said was one line: my mother suffers from mental health. And I felt like I was naked when I said that statement. That's how much shame was attached to it. But this is the point. As I started to heal and start to have the conversation, I talk to you guys all the time. It doesn't even hurt when I talk about it. But I am healing, not for me, for my mom, for my grandparents, everybody who felt shame around talking about the fact that she needed help. And when we have these conversations now you guys got me fired up. When we have these conversations now, do you know how many people are suffering from mental health? And for so long, we just dismissed them. We put them in off to the side in these hospitals, or we did all these things. We pretended, we over medicated. I could go into this whole space. It's despicable what we have done around mental health. But this is a part of that this is a perfect example around generational shame, that people, like, who really all they needed was a little love and a little help. But because of the shame of having someone in your family that wasn't sick or was sick and that didn't look the way that the image was, then we're going to hide it. And boy, when shame loves to live in the darkness and it just plays, you just gave it a playground. So it's not just one person who's having shame. Now it's going from generation to generation about shame. And instead of actually helping the person who gets medicated properly, then it's a non-issue. But you can see it. I know that one firsthand. And that is actually an excellent example because I know that me speaking now, I'm speaking to someone in the crew. Someone's hearing this, and I know I'm not alone. But I had to be courageous enough to deal with the shame that was attached to my story in order to get here. And I actually think it's a part of it. I think that I'm meant to do it. I think this is why it all happened. But that shame to move through that took me 30 years. I carried that for 30 years. And if I didn't do it, I could have sent that over to my kids. So now when I have conversations with my kids and they're like, oh, your grandma's a little weird. Sometimes she acts a little way. I'm like, Grandma, we're going to give Grandma a lot of compassion. We're going to love Grandma because she's doing the best she can and she's struggling. So all we're going to do is we're going to show up with compassion. We know that sometimes it's a little weird when we show up there, but we're going to enjoy it. I am teaching my kids not to hide it. This is fact. We help people. We don't hide. We're not doing that. Not on my watch. But this is the kind of behavior I am exemplifying what I'm talking about, guys. Whatever it is for you, you get the call. Are you going to be brave enough to say, I don't want to carry that shame for the rest of my life? And honestly, if I didn't write that book, I probably would. Maybe I would be still hiding in corporate and kind of being like, oh, I have all my stuff together. Oh, look at that person. They have mental health. I'm not talking about that. I'm referring to myself. But I will never do that, ever, because I think that that's how they win. That's how shame, guilt, judgment, they win when we're hiding it. That's why right now, having the conversation, whatever it is, big, small, the ugly, and saying, we're not going to carry that to the next generation. And like I said, it's not just for our kids. I'm giving you an example of my kids, tactical examples, but it's for the next generation. So when you see someone struggling, do you dismiss it? Do you judge it? Do you say something like, oh, good luck to that person? Oh, well, whew, they're having a hard time. Where's the compassion and empathy in that? Because that could be you in a heartbeat. We should be a community where we are helping each other and really sharing love and support. We're all doing the best we can. And sometimes it's working really well and sometimes it's not. But you really want to know that we are creating a community, a society where we are not judging, but we are supporting each other on a much deeper level. But that scarcity mindset around finances. So think about if you've heard things like this. Money doesn't grow on trees. Stop being so wasteful, right? Things like that. You've got to grind. You've got to work hard for money. This is all scarcity mindset because scarcity is saying that there's not enough. But this is what's getting carried from one generation to the next. And when we understand that we could be putting ourselves in a situation where we're always struggling, we're always feeling as though there isn't enough, we're only holding on to things. Whereas if we're in flow and abundance, you have to let go of things in order for new things to flow in. But these are generational things that have been taught to us. These little sayings that we don't even realize. I used to say it all the time. You got to work hard. Money doesn't grow on trees. You got to grind. So when we say things like that, what's happening to people? People are actually burning themselves out because they are doing, and they are not giving any nurturing to themselves. This is the whole point of the conversation. This is why we need to shift the way we need to shift. So I think that that is very important to acknowledge. And how do we heal it? We got to teach our kids about abundance and generational wealth and different ways of tackling money. That's why I actually think entrepreneurship is quite interesting, because it's showing them that there isn't just one way. Be creative. Hey, Mojo, how's it going?
So this idea that came to me as I was listening to you and Julie talk is that for me, from my perspective, breaking a chain sounds almost impossible, because the chains in my mind are these huge titanium links that are so powerful that I could strain and push and yank. All I want, I could chew on them with my teeth, but I'm not even going to dent the links. But then it came to my mind, Joe, what if the chains aren't padlocked? Or what if the padlock is your limiting belief? And if you unlock it, the chains fall off rather than breaking them. So it's like a different metaphor for me anyway, that my mind says breaking the chains is nearly impossible. But if I find what the lock is that's holding the chains in place and I unlock it, then I pull that padlock off. That I can do. I just got to find the combination to the lock. And once I pull the lock off, I don't have to break the chains anymore. They fall off. I can unwrap them. And that sounds way more doable to me. So I'm asking myself while you're talking, I'm like, all right, what's the padlock, Joe? Because if you don't think you can break the chain, you won't be able to. But if you think you can get the padlock off, well, what's the combination? And I think the combination for me is first identify where the padlock is. So that's an awareness. And then realize that the strongest force that I know of in the universe is love. So I pour love into that locked belief system, LBS, limiting belief system, change the way I think. And when I change the way I look at things, the things I look at change, and I'm opening my mind, which is the lock that's holding the chains in place. And when I open my mind to a different possibility, I change my belief system, I unlock what's holding the chains in place. And then I can either unwrap the chains, I can walk out of them, they'll fall off, or maybe someone will just come help me unwrap them. But I don't actually have to break them anymore. I just need to unlock that limiting belief system.
Well, I think it's funny because there are different approaches. If we're gonna do semantics, because I would argue that when you access the power of who you are, you can break through anything.
It's not either or, it's both and, right?
Right,
so it's
both
really
and.
the path that you take, it's both and. Both are possible.
Yeah, both are possible. And I think that I love that you shared that, because I think that there's a bigger message here. The point is, however you get there, there's multiple ways to do it. And I love that. I'm a break person. I want to kick indoors. You guys know me well enough. I'm like, oh, I'm here. Let's go it. But I've also seen other people that I have to be more aware that they're not like that. They like to ease into it. They like to come into it slowly, walk into the water slowly. And that's where I think that we're covering both angles. I think it's actually very powerful. Great point.
Yes, agreed. And I would say, even though our personalities tend to do it one way or another, there are times in our life where, because of the circumstances, the context, there are times in my life where I absolutely need to break the chain. I need to find that superpower. I need to realize I have the power to break them and just reach into that superpower that is me and bust them apart. I need to do that. But there are also times in my life, due to the circumstances, due to my own belief systems, that I must find the lock, unlock it, and allow the chains to fall off. And that's not only true for me, but that's also, I need to be really aware when I'm trying to help somebody else. Are they a chain breaker, or are they an unlocker? And maybe that's contextual to their circumstances. So I love this discussion, because, as you said, there's many ways to break the cycle, the negative cycle, and become a transformation person that stops the madness from one generation to the next. And sometimes we bust the chains out and we find our superpower. And sometimes we're just a super sleuth and we find where the lock is, we unlock it, and we just walk right out of them.
key, the overall message based on today's show is that these are ways to acknowledge and break free or unlock the chains. So you're no longer stuck. And you can really start making shifts in your life and for the next generation. Don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and behind the scene contents. And if you have any suggestions about future topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring the fascinating world around you. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.